Yusuke Urameshi is a delinquent teenager. One day, in order to protect a child, he died in accident. Surprisingly, after death, Yusuke was able to see his own body. He shouted loudly, trying to call the medical staff. However, no one could hear Yusuke's words. He stood still, dumbfounded. A woman named Peony appears. She claimed to be a spirit world guide. In other words, a grim reaper. Yusuke ignored the chattering girl. He ran to the hospital to visit the child who was saved. The child only suffered minor injuries. Despite Yusuke's idle appearance, his heart was actually very soft. Yusuke fights at school, because he can't stand seeing someone bully his classmates. The single mother completely indulged him. This upbringing shaped Yusuke's current personality. Peony sighed, saying appearances can be deceiving. However, Yusuke's current situation is quite tricky. The spirit world didn't expect such a delinquent teenager. He died because he saved someone. So Yusuke doesn't belong to hell, nor does he belong to heaven. Peony opened the gate to the spirit world, indicating that you should discuss this matter with our leader. Yusuke followed Peony into the spirit world. Here, let me briefly explain the worldview. Long ago, the human world and the demon world were connected. Humans who wandered into the demon world would become food for the demons. Demons would also infiltrate the human world to prey upon them. To prevent this situation, the spirit world drew a boundary line between the two realms, separating the human world from the demon world. Muden's boss is Yama from the spiritual world. Yama classifies the souls of the deceased, and assigns them to either heaven or hell. After Yama learned about Yusuke's situation, he decided to give him a chance at reincarnation. As an exchange, Yusuke must serve as a detective in the spirit world in the human world, investigating cases related to demons in the human world. Just as the words fell, he reached out in front of him. A winged insect emerged from the water's surface. This kind of monster is called Morhue-chong. The driver who killed Yusuke was under the influence of the Morhue-chong curse. The first task Yusuke received, it's to investigate why the demonic return insect appeared in the human world. Yusuke rejects Yama's proposal, because he had no desire to be resurrected. His mother always considered him a burden. Maybe it would be better for everyone if he were dead. The scene shifts, arriving at a luxurious casino. The boss Sakyo is a celebrity in Sariyashiki City. Recently, he plans to develop the famous sinkhole in the area, transforming it into an entertainment venue. The Morhue-chong mentioned by Yama, they crawl out from that large sinkhole. The ownership of the sinkhole is in the hands of a wealthy man named Terkane. He surveyed the hole. There was no treasure inside. So Terkane is curious why Sakyo wants to buy the sinkhole. Sakyo immediately answers, because that hole extends all the way to the demon world. Since Sakyo knows about the demon world's existence, then he is certainly not an ordinary person. On the other hand, Peony hasn't given up on persuading Yusuke, because the spirit world is short-staffed. She tells Yusuke not to speculate on what others are thinking. You should attend your wake. See the genuine reactions of your family. After hesitating, Yusuke goes to the wake. The male classmates are joking and laughing. They don't care about his death at all. Only Koyono, who Yusuke had helped before, genuinely feels sad. But the delinquents still won't leave Koyono alone. They continue to bully he even at the wake. Huang Mao intervened in time to stop it. This guy often fights with Yusuke. Surprisingly, they developed a sense of sympathy for each other. Yusuke's death. He feels very sad. Even a pretentious teenager has a pure heart. Finally, Yusuke entered the spirit world. The rescued child and his mother came to pay their respects. The child is too young to understand the concept of death. He asked his mother when Yusuke would wake up. I want to thank Big Brother. Yusuke's mother kept everything in her heart. She curled up in a corner, consumed by sadness. Until this moment, Yusuke finally understood. His mother loved him. As dusk approached, female classmate Hotaru stayed behind, keeping Yusuke's mother company. Hotaru was the only person at school who knew Yusuke's kind heart. They reminisced about the fun times with Yusuke before his passing. Hotaru couldn't help but cry in sorrow. After the girl fell asleep, Yusuke quietly comforted her not to be sad. After this wake, Yusuke plans to accept Enma's proposal. Meanwhile, Koyono is surrounded by bad students. 17 or 18-year-old kid hit someone too hard. They beat Koyono, leaving him mouth full of blood. The leader of the delinquents even pulled out a lighter. They threatened to burn Koyono to death. Just when the boy felt desperate, a Morhue-chong worm crawled into his ear. Koyono suddenly unleashed a powerful force. He lunged at the crowd like a zombie. The bad students were frightened and scattered. Koyono knocked over a motorcycle nearby. The oil from the fuel tank spread on the ground, flowing towards a lighter nearby. A loud explosion erupted in the yard. Huang Mao rushed over upon hearing the noise, but he saw the delinquents running away. He rushed to the fire to assess the situation. He saw Koyono possessed by a monster. Yama also saw everything in the spirit world. He informed Yusuka to go and stop the monster. The fire was spreading rapidly. It soon reached Yusuka's house. Yusuka's mother wanted to rush into the fire to save her son's body. The neighbors held her back. Hotaru saw the situation and rushed into the fire. Yusuka was extremely anxious. He rushed over and braced the almost broken beam. Yama also helped revive Yusuka. The protagonist rescued Hotaru. He didn't have time to explain to his mother. He immediately went to find Koyono. Demonic bugs can possess negative people, making them even more negative. Huang Mao's people were fighting with Koyono at that moment. Koyono, possessed by the monster, had immense strength. Several people couldn't catch Koyono together. Huang Mao was knocked unconscious by Koyono with a strike. Yusuka's arrived at the critical moment. He kicked Koyono away. The Mohuechon worm started to counterattack. Both sides will be injured if we continue like this. Yusuka's asked Yama how to force out the monster. Yama explained that only spiritual power can achieve it, but it's difficult to explain this thing in a short time. Yusuka comprehended while fighting. Peony anxiously interrupted. When you just saved Ingzi, you used your spiritual power. Quickly recall that feeling. The Mohuechon worm is moving under Koyono's skin. His right hand transformed into a hook shape. Yusuka's was forced to retreat repeatedly. His abdomen was scratched by the hook. Thanks to him being a delinquent for several years, he still had some fighting skills. Yusuka's wrapped the wire around Koyono. Now is the best opportunity. He held onto the wire and kept attacking. Koyono exerted his strength and broke free from the restraints. Yusuka saw this and quickly ran away. Koyono chased after him closely from behind. A leaking gas canister rolled near the bonfire. Yusuka's grabbed a metal plate to shield his body. Immediately, a massive explosion occurred. Koyono was blasted away, but the Mohuechon worm did not die. Yusuka's grabbed a bicycle and crashed into it. He tried to make Koyono regain some clarity. When you were being bullied, you didn't give up resisting. How can you be controlled by a mere worm? Words are still effective at critical moments. Koyono's hand gradually returned to normal. Yusuka's flew up and pinned Koyono to the ground. Yusuka's grabbed the worm and crushed it, successfully completing the first task. By the time he finished dealing with everything, it was already the next morning. Yusuka's finally had time to go see his mother. However, a new monster had already appeared. This was just the beginning. In a nearby location, a great battle was taking place. Various new characters were appearing one after another. They stole the 3 major treasures guarded by the spirit world. Yusuka had to catch the monster thieves and retrieve the stolen treasures. These 3 monsters were named Gangu, Zangma, and Feiying. Yusuka trained hard to enhance his spiritual power in order to defeat them. Unexpectedly, something happened quickly. Gangu used the stolen, hungry ghost orb to absorb the souls of children in the park. Peony explained. Gangu feeds on human souls, particularly those of children. They circled around major parks but couldn't detect Gangu's demonic energy. Yusuka's stomach growled, so he decided to grab a meal first. He encountered a child he had previously saved. From the child's mouth, he learned that many children were fainting for no reason near their community. Yusuka's quickly rushed to the vicinity of that community. He saw Gangu holding the hungry ghost orb. He just caught up with him. Gangu suddenly quickened his pace and disappeared into a scrap car processing plant. Yusuka saw the hungry ghost orb on the ground and was about to pick it up. Unexpectedly, Gangu pounced on him aggressively and had already transformed into his monster form. Gangu's characteristic is his tremendous strength. Yusuka's with his agile body quickly hid inside a car. The opponent directly grabbed a motorcycle and threw it at him. Yusuka's huddled inside the car seat, waiting for Gangu to approach, and then kicked the car door. He used the car door to block Gangu's fierce attack. However, Gangu was exceptionally fierce and directly ripped the door off. Yusuka turned around and kicked him, but in the face of absolute force, his moves have no effect at all. Gangu pushed a car and rammed it, then climbed up an electric pole. prepare to sit Yusuka to death. Fortunately, the protagonist dodged in time and entangled Gangu's right arm with his leg. However, he was flung several meters away by Gangu. Gangu smashed the car roof and windows, trying to pull Yusuka's out, but Yusuka's clung to the car like a plaster and couldn't be pulled out. Enraged, Gangu overturned the car, but Yusuka was nowhere to be found inside. Gangu searched around while Yusuka's hid in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity. This time, the delivery truly came to his doorstep. In a critical moment, a little boy unexpectedly appeared and persuaded Gangu to release his big brother. Seeing this, Gangu immediately took out the hungry ghost orb and started absorbing. Just as he was about to devour the boy's soul, Yusuka picked up a wrench from the ground and jammed it into Gangu's mouth. Finally, he unleashed his cosmos and unleashed a powerful spiritual energy. Gangu was defeated, and the souls returned to their rightful places. Meanwhile, the demon Zangma was observing from the sidelines. Yusuka informed Peony about this discovery. However, she mentioned that even the spirit world knows little about Zangma. However, the dark mirror he took is very powerful. By simply gazing into the mirror, it can make people's wishes come true. However, the dark mirror only exerts its power during the full moon. They were engrossed in their conversation and completely unaware of the presence of Huang Mao's, who was behind them. Speaking of which, it's strange that after Huang Mao's was injured by Kueono and discharged from the hospital, he could actually see Peony existence. He witnessed her disappear into thin air right before his eyes. He wanted to know who Peony really was. Meanwhile, Yusuka returned to the main street and unexpectedly ran into Zangma. He followed the demon into the bustling city. TMA stopped and bought a bouquet of flowers. He then took the flowers and went to a nearby general hospital. Yusuka followed him into a particular hospital room. Suddenly, Zangma emerged from behind him. Zangma walked up to a woman's hospital bed. From their conversation, it seemed they turned out to be a mother and son relationship. Zangma's wish was to heal his mother. He told Yusuka that 17 years ago, he was pursued and severely injured by a powerful enemy. To escape from the enemy's pursuit, Zangma entered the woman's womb. He originally planned to leave once he regained his strength, but his mother suddenly fell ill, with only 1 month left to live. Zangma only wanted to save her life. At this moment, Huang Mao's hid in the shadows and overheard their conversation. Yusuka was moved by Zangma's story and wanted to help him. Peony brought some bad news. The dark mirror, when granting wishes, takes away the life of the wisher. Tonight is the full moon, and Yusuka plans to find Zangma. However, he was stopped by Huang Mao's. Yusuka ignored his words and hurried to the hospital. At that moment, Zangma was making a wish in front of the mirror. A tremendous energy enveloped him. Ignoring Huang Mao's dissuasion, Yusuka rushed inside. They both fell into the mirror world together. Yusuka knew how much pain his mother went through after his death. Therefore, he understood that Zangma's mother didn't want to sacrifice her son for her own health. Yusuka made a wish to the mirror. He was willing to give up half of his life to save Zangma. Huang Mao's watched the entire process, admiring Yusuka so much that one is completely in awe. This is the true demeanor of a school leader. On the other hand, inside Kurama's luxurious mansion, a green-haired monster named Ice Maiden is being held captive. Her tears can turn into ice tear stones. Kurama has been tormenting Ice Maiden to make money. The vehicle transporting the ice tear stones that night was intercepted by the monster called Feiying Shadow. Upon learning this, Kurama flew into a rage. He immediately contacted Ice Maiden's former owner, Hiei, and expressed his intention to return her. The transaction regarding the sinkhole is voided. Upon hearing this, Hiei proposed a suggestion. He asked Kurama to bring Ice Maiden and come to him. Hiei would personally create more ice tear stones, and protect him from thieves. Yusuka received the news quickly. Feiying Shadow only attacks Kurama's subordinates, who are jewelers. In order to uncover the truth, he infiltrated Kurama's mansion. The stolen treasure that Feiying Shadow took is called the Sword of Demon Subjugation. It grants people the power they have always desired. While Yama was giving explanations halfway, gunshots were heard at the mansion's entrance. Feiying Shadow revealed himself. Yusuka dove down to grab the sword. However, Feiying Shadow lives up to his name. He moves as fast as a shadow. Yusuka is no match for him. Feiying Shadow has principles. He won't easily draw his sword against humans. Feiying Shadow came this time only to find Ice Maiden, but Kurama sent a helicopter. to transport Ice Maiden to Hiei's base, Shuichi Island. Hiei is a pervert. He built an arena on the island. Let the monsters kill each other for the amusement of the rich. The new character, Toya Kagura, is the star player here. Hiei plans to send him to protect the Ice Tear Stones. The two of them locked Ice Maiden in a prison cell. When the curtain was opened, the cage was empty. Kurama's subordinates felt pity. They rescued Ice Maiden, who was of a similar age to their little sisters. Just as the two of them arrived at the helicopter, they were stopped by Toya Kagura's shoulder pendant. Kurama's subordinates immediately opened fire. The pendant brother killed his subordinates. Ice Maiden fell into Hiei's hands again. Kurama opened the surveillance cameras in the mansion. He wanted to deal with Fei-ing Shadow and Yusuka. Hiei gathered a group of elites. Their flashy attire made people think they were at a comic convention. Sakyo spent so much effort to buy the sinkhole. It's nominally for entertainment renovation, but the real intention was to bridge the human and demon worlds. On the other side, Yama, in order to help Yusuka against Fei-ing Shadow, specifically found a martial arts master named Genkai. Huang Mao's, upon learning this, wanted to learn together. Master Genkai is a very ordinary middle-aged woman, but she has powerful spiritual energy. Yusuka, at first, was still unwilling to accept it. However, he was quickly defeated by Genkai. The old lady is really powerful. She can defeat Yusuka without even using her hands. However, the male protagonist is exceptionally talented. After a few moves, he can mimic Genkai's techniques. As for the less talented Huang Mao's, Genkai gave him the task to break the stones in the courtyard with a wooden sword. On the other hand, Fei-ing Shadow was gloomy and worried. The captured Ice Maiden is his sister. Fei-ing Shadow, in order to save his sister, unlocked the evil eye with the demonic sword. Zhang Ma saw that he had unlocked a new power. I just want to take the demon-conquering sword and give it back to Yusuka. As a repayment, Zhang Ma can gather information about Ice Maiden. However, Fei-ing Shadow doesn't trust humans, so he flatly refused. 14 days of training passed. However, Genkai doesn't have much faith in Yusuka, because he doesn't have the right attitude. Huang Mao's, with his passionate spirit, relentlessly strikes the boulders day and night. His hands are worn and injured from the wooden sword. His battle with Kueono made him feel guilty. If he doesn't get stronger, he won't be able to protect his friends. Huang Mao's firmly grips the wooden sword with determination and strikes the boulder. Unexpectedly, he burst out with a trace of spiritual energy. The huge rock was split in half by the strike. Yusuka immediately became unsettled upon seeing this. If things continue like this, not to mention Fei-ing Shadow, he probably won't even be able to beat Huang Mao. Soon, another 6 days passed. Yusuka finally made some progress. Genkai also began the next phase of training. Let him try to gather his spiritual power. Master Genkai knew the timing was right, so she officially imparted the secret of the Spirit Wave Fist, officially passed down to Yusuka. Afterwards, the two of them completed their training and descended the mountain. Toya Kagura sensed the energy fluctuations. It had been a long time since he encountered an opponent, and he immediately became excited. That evening, Toya Kagura rushed to Genkai's residence. In fact, the two of them had the same master, but they followed different paths and had no common goals. Toya Kagura saw that Genkai had already lost the Spirit Orb, so he planned to personally deal with this old friend. Yusuka was unaware that his master was in trouble. Having just filled his stomach at a ramen shop, he bid farewell to Hotaru and intended to go home. But then he heard a loud clattering sound. Hotaru had been taken away by Fei-ing Shadow. Yusuka chased after them in the pouring rain. These intensive 20+ days of training were not in vain. Now Yusuka can go toe-to-toe with Fei-ing Shadow in a fight, and even have a slight advantage. However, the one who kidnapped Hotaru was not Fei-ing Shadow. It was Hiei, who used a disguise technique. He noticed that his good friend Toya Kagura was interested in Yusuka, so he captured Hotaru to force him to reveal himself. As for Fei-ing Shadow, he was truly innocent. He had no idea why Yusuka went crazy, so he could only draw his sword and fight seriously. Luckily, Zhang Ma arrived just in time, and helped them resolve the misunderstanding. Now Ice Maiden and Hotaru are both in the hands of Sakyo. The three of them have to go to Mei's castle. Unexpectedly, Huang Mao's received the news from Peony, and hurriedly rushed to join them. Meanwhile, Sakyo couldn't wait for them to arrive. As he wanted to add some excitement to the arena, he directly sent his subordinates to invite the four of them onto the island. Yusuka and the others set off by boat. His subordinates informed them that as long as they could defeat the monsters raised by the boss, they could take Hotaru and Ice Maiden with them. On Sakyo's side, the guests had already entered the arena before the matches began. These wealthy spectators would place bets on the contestants, treat killing completely as a game. At this moment, Yusuka and the others entered the small island. Fei Shadow, who usually acted alone, quickly disappeared. The remaining three entered the nearby abandoned factory. A masked monster named Karasu appeared. Zangma immediately whipped out his whip. He instructed Yusuka and the others to go rescue the hostages first. He stayed behind to deal with Karasu. The wealthy spectators were watching the battle through the surveillance cameras. They saw Zangma whip whistling through the air. It coiled around Karasu like a swimming snake, not letting go. The latter shoots flaming shells out of thin air. He shattered the wooden boards behind Zangma. Zangma could only use his whip to dodge the attacks. Zangma maneuvered back and forth inside the factory. When he found an opening, he swung the whip at Karasu. This sequence of movements was beautifully designed. It was truly delightful to watch. Karasu performed several consecutive backflips. He kept launching attacks, but this time, the cannon blasts became invisible in mid-air. Zangma couldn't discern their location. Countless transparent explosive points covered the airspace. Zangma transformed his vine whip into roses. He instantly threw them towards the front. The vibrant red petals scattered in all directions. They quickly neutralized a large portion of the invisible cannons. Taking advantage of the thick smoke as cover, Zangma fired another rose. However, Karasu intercepted it with his outstretched hand. Faced with a series of consecutive cannon attacks, Zangma had no choice but to reveal his true form as a fox demon. After shedding the burden of his human body, his speed and strength greatly increased. The tide of battle quickly turned. Zangma Demon World Mimosa had the ability to autonomously attack moving objects. Therefore, Karasu's attacks were completely ineffective. Mimosa quickly wrapped him up. Unexpectedly, Zangma Vine swiftly withered. He had actually lost his demonic energy. Just when Karasu believed he had secured certain victory, Zangma emitted a sinister laugh. He even asked if Karasu knew about the shamanwood grass, a parasitic plant that takes root inside living organisms. As long as Zangma gave the command, the plant would burst out from within the body. When he fired the roses, he had planted seeds inside Karasu. Unfortunate for Karasu, he exploded and perished. On the other hand, Fei Shadow was also locked in a fierce battle. His opponent was the armored monster wielding a giant axe. Mighty. The enormous axe blade was extremely sharp. Fei Shadow was pushed to the point where he couldn't retaliate. Even if he found an opening to attack, the opponent was still protected by the armor. Fei Shadow exerted great effort to remove Mighty's armor. Surprisingly, Mighty's speed increased without the armor. If the fight dragged on, it would only disadvantage Fei Shadow. He untied the bandages on his hands, preparing for his ultimate move. Black Dragon smashed Mighty straight down to the core of the earth. However, after using this move, Flying Shadow also suffered great exhaustion. He disregarded the dying Mighty and went to find his sister. On the other side, Yusuka and Huang Mao's rushed into the prison. In order to save time, they split up. Meanwhile, Hotaru did not sit idly by. She pretended to have a stomachache, luring the guard into the cell, and then using the wrestling technique Yusuka had taught her to knock him out. Hotaru opened the adjacent cell and took Ice Maiden with her. However, Hiei quickly noticed them from the surveillance cameras. He saw Hotaru and Ice Maiden climbing to the second floor. Suddenly, they caught sight of a figure on the wall. The two quickly hid behind the wall. Seizing the opportunity, Hotaru threw a punch at the figure. It turned out the person was actually Huang Mao's. Hotaru quickly approached to console him. Huang Mao's was about to say he was fine, but he was suddenly struck by Cupid's arrow. Ice Maiden was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Huang Mao's led the two of them to find an exit. Unexpectedly, they accidentally opened a beast cage. An ugly and hideous monster rushed out through the iron gate. The three of them ran as fast as they could. Huang Mao's protected the weakened Ice Maiden, desperately evading the monster's attacks. Quick-thinking Hotaru used an iron rod to strike the ground. She attracted the attention of the monster on the side. Huang Mao's took the iron rod from her hand, urging the two to escape quickly. Hotaru saw the rolling shutter door above. She quickly used a fire axe to break the switch. The rolling shutter door slowly descended. Hotaru shouted for Huang Mao's to come out quickly. Upon hearing this, Huang Mao swiftly fled toward the door. Huang Mao's rushed out of the door at the critical moment. Unfortunately, the three of them hadn't gone far. He met Brother Pendant. Although this monster had the size of a child, his body was like rubber clay. Not only could he easily neutralize attacks, but he could also transform at will. Meanwhile, Yusuke finally came face to face with Toguro. This was the main event of the day. Meanwhile, Kurama received some good news. The abyss was about to open up. The epic battle between Yusuke and Toguro began. Toguro was almost on par with the Hulk in terms of strength. His astonishing power left people speechless. Yusuke had a very tough fight. Toguro grabbed a railing and threw it at Yusuke's face. At a critical moment, Fei Ying Shadow and Zangma arrived at the scene. At the same time, Toguro's brother was dealing with Huang Mao's. Hotaru, seeing her comrade in danger, picked up a fire extinguisher and threw it. Huang Mao's couldn't help but remember how his friends had risked their lives to protect him. He almost got killed by Kueono. He couldn't let the tragedy repeat itself. Huang Mao's released his spiritual energy and transformed it into a samurai sword. Quickly slash at Brother Pendant. But Brother Pendant's limbs quickly came together. Meanwhile, the abyss had already opened. Countless demon parasites flew towards the ground. Yama created a protective barrier around the abyss. However, this power wouldn't last long. He decided to go meet Kurama. Kurama proposed a wager to Yama. If Yusuke and the others won, he would shut down the machinery inside the abyss, at the cost of his own life. On the other hand, if Toguro emerged victorious, Yama would break the barrier between the two worlds. After Kurama finished speaking, he gave Toguro an order to fight against them with a 3-to-1 disadvantage. Toguro expressed indifference. This level of small monsters and little detectives, even if there were 4 more, it wouldn't be enough to pose a challenge. The main group was disoriented by Toguro's attacks. They could only cooperate and fight together. Yusuke slammed Toguro into a wall. The protruding iron rod pierced through his body. Yusuke immediately fired a spirit gun, embedding Toguro into the wall. Surprisingly, he emerged unscathed. He turned the tables and knocked Yusuke down to the ground. Coincidentally, Huang Mao's and the others came running over. The Pendant brother also joined his younger brother. He saw Yusuke and the others lying on the ground. He couldn't help but sigh. Genkai really died in vain. She actually entrusted the spirit wave orb to this useless person. Villains can never control their own mouths. Yusuke and Huang Mao's only just found out that their master was killed. Toguro didn't want to listen to nonsense. He punched him and sent him flying. Huang Mao's rushed forward to avenge their master, but he was stepped on by Toguro. Anger ignited in Yusuke's heart. He punched Toguro. He used the spiritual light jade to use a set of combos, slamming the opponent into the ground. But Toguro was no ordinary opponent. He climbed back up from the ground, and his body swelled several times in size, with bulging muscles. If the Gangu was a power-type demon, then the current Toguro was the Deluxe Plus version. The air pressure generated from his flicking fingers could turn into lethal weapons. Toguro grabbed Yusuke by the neck, lift his whole body into the air. At the same time, Peony discovered Toguro's background. 50 years ago, he and Genkai were top martial arts masters, until a monster named Ku Lian appeared. He challenged Toguro to a fight, and defeated him effortlessly. Then, in front of Toguro, Ku Lian, he ate all of his disciples. Before Ku Lian's arrival, Toguro was full of confidence, thinking that he could defeat any opponent. But Ku Lian's power destroyed everything. He looked at Yusuke in front of him, and thought of himself 50 years ago. That's why he said that Yusuke lacked a sense of crisis. Toguro shifted his focus to Hotaru, hoping to unleash Yusuke's potential. Fei Ying and 3 others stood in front of him, and that's exactly what Toguro wanted. Right in front of Yusuke, he punched through Huang Mao's abdomen, just like what Kuei-lin had done years ago. Yusuke's spiritual power surged, almost catching up to Toguro's power. His spiritual power was supported by immense grief. Although powerful, it was unstable. At that moment, Yusuke had only one thought, that he couldn't let down Genkai and Huang Mao's. Toguro's after enduring torment and training. He severed his humanity in order to become stronger. But Yusuke was completely different from Toguro. He didn't lack a sense of crisis, but rather, he was willing to protect everyone, prepared to sacrifice himself at any moment. Yusuke gathered all his power into his fingertips, and unleashed his most lethal strike. Toguro desperately blocked the attack, but he was still overwhelmed by the powerful spiritual energy. Fortunately, he was defeated by the most honorable opponent. His lifelong wish had been fulfilled. Huang Mao suddenly coughed twice. Ice Maiden immediately went over to heal him. Fei Ying saw that his sister had been saved, so he handed over the Demon Slayer sword. Shishiwakamaru also kept his promise and turned off his device. He pointed the gun at his own head. After Toguro's death, he chose the harshest hell. It was a punishment for his actions in life. Unexpectedly, Genkai intervened halfway. Toguro had already made up his mind, and he walked into hell without looking back. The story of this episode ends here. This drama is adapted from Yoshihiro Togashi's legendary manga. Since 1990, the manga has been serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump for 4 consecutive years. It has also been adapted into an anime series and movies of the same name. It has received numerous praises. Unexpectedly, it was made into a live-action adaptation by Netflix. Due to the short length of the story, some characters appear a bit underdeveloped. The plot lacks highlights. However, the action scenes are impressive. Battle scenes occupy almost 2/3 of the story. It's evident that a lot of effort was put into them. They are smooth and highly entertaining. Overall, it's still worth watching.